All right, so FSL Season 8, Week 7. Bill Boys had a tough loss in that ace match last week, so the pressure is definitely on as they go up against InfiniteCyclists this week. And, oh boy, we've got a rematch. That's going to be spicy. DarkMenace versus Harouz. After DarkMenace took down Harouz's brother, Lighthood, last season. It's going to be good.
Yeah, adding that family rivalry element, it definitely makes this match even more interesting, right? Just adds a whole other, like, psychological layer to it now.
Oh, for sure. And looking at the standings, InfiniteCyclists are coming off a win against Cheesy Nachos, while Pull the Boys are looking to bounce back. Should be an intense matchup.
It was a wild one. Pull the Boys really brought it this week, ending with a 7-1 victory over InfiniteCyclists. But, as always, to really get the full story, we need to break down those individual matches.
Absolutely. Let's start with that Code S face-off. DarkMenace, the Zerg, versus Harouz, the Protoss. This one went 2-0 for DarkMenace.
Yeah, Game 1 on Dynasty was closer than the final score suggests. You know, DarkMenace actually admitted that he was nervous about the map, and his early game was super cautious. But what's interesting is that Harouz, he ended up with a massive worker lead, like 70 workers to DarkMenace's 50 at one point. You'd think that'd be game over, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge advantage. You'd think he could just, like, roll over DarkMenace with that kind of economy.
Right. But this is where things get interesting. So instead of focusing on wiping out DarkMenace's drones with those oracles, Harouz goes for a hatchery. Missed opportunity, to say the least.
So he lets DarkMenace off the hook, basically, giving him time to catch up.
Exactly. And even though Harouz was ahead on bases and had, like, a good army composition going, you know, Colossi against Hydra lurkers, things went south pretty quickly. He lost that first army, including 2 Colossi, because he got completely surrounded. And then he loses another Colossus to a Misroli.
Ouch, those misplays can be backbreakers.
Yeah. And from there, the army disparity was just too much. You know, DarkMenace is known for his ability to just capitalize on those kinds of mistakes. And he snowballed to victory.
Yeah, he's definitely got that killer instinct. So, on to Game 2. Did Harouz change his strategy at all?
He did. On Gold Aurora, he went for Void Rays instead of the Oracle opening, but DarkMenace countered it perfectly. He even managed to cancel Harouz's third base. That's some next level awareness right there.
So DarkMenace was reading him like a book at this point.
Yeah.
Anticipating his every move.
Pretty much. And the turning point in Game 2 was another engagement on high ground. It looked like Harouz had the advantage. Archons, Void Rays, Storms, Oracles for detection, the whole shebang. But then, 2 lurkers sneak past the detection.
Oh no, I can see where this is going.
Yeah, those lurkers did some serious work, turning the tide of the battle. And just like that, DarkMenace snowballs again for another decisive win. This time it wasn't even close.
Alright, so DarkMenace takes the Code S match with authority. Let's move on to Code B, which, from what I hear, wasn't quite as exciting.
Yeah, Code B was unfortunately a bit one-sided. Nismo Flarum, the Protoss, faced off against Cheesy the Terran, and Cheesy just dominated both games.
A 2-0 sweep. Oof. That's gotta be rough for Nismo Flarum.
Yeah, it was a tough one to watch. In Game 1, Cheesy's micro was just insane. He was doing so much damage with a single Reaper.
Wait. A single Reaper? Really?
Yep. But to be fair, both games kind of followed a similar pattern. Like, Cheesy bio army just overwhelmed Nismo Flarum's forces.
So was it a case of, like, Nismo Flarum not producing enough units? Or was Cheesy army just that much better?
It's hard to say for sure, but Nismo Flarum's macro seemed solid. He just seemed to be. Slightly behind in timing, and couldn't keep up with Cheesy aggression, like he needed more units on the field to hold those attacks.
The classic timing issues in StarCraft. Sometimes even a slight delay can make all the difference. Alright, let's move on to Code A, Hyper Turtle versus Deepu. Always a fun matchup.
This one went 1-1, and both games were pretty interesting. In Game 1 on Post-Youth, Hyper Turtle, the Zerg, he got off to a strong economic start thanks to that free expansion on the map. Jipu, the Terran, he went for a riskier double gas Rack's first build.
So he was delaying his second command center, hoping to do some early damage.
Exactly. But that early Hellion pressure didn't work out at all. Hyper Turtle shut it down completely and just kept expanding his economy. He even got his third base up, while Dooku was still stuck on 2.
Oof, that's a tough spot to be in. Catching up from that kind of economic disadvantage is a tall order.
It really is, and Hyper Turtle just kept rolling from there. A Culling run by killed 3 of Dooku's Marauders, weakening his push, and then he countered the main attack with a classic Roach Ravager composition.
Roach Ravager, solid choice. Gets the job done more often than not.
For sure. Jupu tried one last attack, but Hyper Turtle's defense was too strong, and he took the win. But then, we get to game 2 on Oceanborn, and Jupu decides to switch things up.
Okay, what did he have up his sleeve this time?
Well, he actually beat Hyper Turtle on this map before with an early drop, so he decided to try it again.
Interesting, so he's adapting based on past experience. I like it.
Yeah. And while the drop wasn't a complete knockout blow, it did allow him to kill some workers. Then he pushed onto high ground with tank support, getting good trades, and just keeping up the pressure. Eventually, he secured his third base and rode that momentum to victory.
Smart play by Depot. It's always cool to see players adjust their strategies based on previous matches. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it definitely keeps things interesting.
Agreed. All right, ready to dive into the 2v2 match.
Hit me with it. Who was playing and how did it go down?
Okay, so we had Gree Empire and Hyper Turtle, both Zerg for InfiniteCyclists, going up against Little Reaper, the Protoss, and DarkMenace, the Zerg, for Pulled the Boys.
Zerg on Zerg crime. Gotta love those team compositions.
Right, and this one also went the distance, 2-0 victory for Little Reaper and DarkMenace.
Okay, take me through game 1. What were the highlights?
Well, Gree Empire. He took a really risky forward third base early on, which immediately put them on edge.
Yeah, that's a bold move. You're putting a lot of faith in your teammate to hold the line.
For sure. There were some early skirmishes with Adepts and Lings, but InfiniteCyclists' early pressure was shut down hard. They couldn't get anything going near him. Pulled the boys' base.
So strong start for InfiniteCyclists, but I'm guessing it didn't last.
Unfortunately, no. Little Reaper pushed back, and DarkMenace saw an opening for a Ling run by. He managed to kill it clean and do some damage to Gree Empire's third base.
Classic DarkMenace. Always looking for those aggressive plays. And I'm guessing Little Reaper and DarkMenace didn't let up after that.
Nope, they pulled back, amassed a huge force. Like, Little Reaper had 10 gateways pumping out charge lots, and then just steamrolled InfiniteCyclists. Storms, Archons for cover, there was no stopping that push. Pulled the boys, took game 1 in a convincing fashion.
Sounds like they really capitalized on that early mistake and just ran with it. What about game 2? Did InfiniteCyclists manage to turn things around?
Not quite. Game 2 on Catalyst was a bit more cautious at the start. Lots of scouting during exchanges, feeling each other out. But DarkMenace managed to land some good battling hits, even sniping Hyper Turtle's hatchery at one point.
Ouch. Losing a hatchery early is never a good sign.
Definitely not. Things were quiet for a bit, but then Hyper Turtle goes for Spire and starts banking mutas.
Classic Zerg air strategy. Did it work?
Sadly, no. Pulled the boys decided to just go all in with a massive ground force. And while those mutas were uncontested in the air, they didn't have the ground support to hold off the attack. Pulled the boys rolled over them with roaches and charge lots, securing the win. Tough loss for InfiniteCyclists.
So Pulled the Boys take the 2v2 and the overall match with a commanding 7-1 score. Brutal. But before we move on to next week's matchups, let's take a step back and look at some of the key takeaways from these games. What stood out to you?
Well, I think it's safe to say that DarkMenace is playing out of his mind right now. He was a force to be reckoned with in both Code S and the 2v2. His aggression, his ability to read his opponents is really impressive.
Yeah, he's definitely on another level right now. What else caught your eye?
I thought it was interesting to see Deepu try that early drop strategy again. Based on his past success against Hyper Turtle, it just goes to show that learning from past matches is crucial, but you also have to be prepared for your opponent to adapt as well.
Absolutely. StarCraft is as much a mental game as it is a strategic one. Anticipating your opponent's moves is just as important as executing your own.
Right. And another thing that stood out was the struggles in Code B. It highlights just how important timing and unit production are in this game. You can have the right ideas, but if you're even slightly behind, it can be really tough to recover, especially against an aggressive player like Chinfeng.
Yeah, finding that balance between expanding, catching up, and producing enough units.
And with that in mind, I'm really curious to see how InfiniteCyclists bounce back next week. Against Rage's Raiders, who are also currently 1-1, that's going to be a crucial match for both teams.
Absolutely.